Have you ever sat alone, staring at the phone that never rings, wondering, when did I stop mattering to my own children? You gave them your all years of love, sacrifice, and sleepless nights. But now, when you speak, you're dismissed. When you need them, they're nowhere to be found. It hurts more than words can say. But what if I told you the way to bring back respect isn't by begging, yelling, or guilt-tripping? What if the answer lies in something quieter, something stronger? In the next few minutes, you'll learn how to reclaim your voice, your dignity, and your peace. The quiet shift when love turns into silence. It doesn't happen all at once. There's no dramatic moment, no slammed doors or angry words. One day, you're helping your child move into their first apartment, and the next, you're watching the years roll by as they slip further and further away. The calls get shorter, the visits get fewer, the conversations become surface level. Before you know it, there's a silence between you that no one talks about, but you feel it every single day. You begin to wonder, did I do something wrong? Did I love too much? Or not enough? But here's the truth that most parents never say out loud. This kind of emotional distance isn't about failure, it's about change. And how we, as parents, respond to that change can either bring us peace or leave us aching. Take Linda, for example. Linda is 72 years old. She raised 3 kids on her own after her husband passed away early. She worked double shifts, never missed a school play, and stayed up countless nights to be there when her children needed someone to talk to. She gave everything without ever asking for anything in return. But now, her kids live busy lives. They have families of their own, jobs, stress, distractions. Linda still calls, still offers to help, still tries to stay involved. But more often than not, her messages go unanswered. Her offers are met with polite refusals or vague promises to catch up soon. And slowly, something inside her began to shift. She stopped reaching out so much. She stopped offering. Not because she didn't care, but because she was tired of feeling invisible. That's the moment many parents reach, the moment when love begins to feel like a one-way street. And in that quiet realization, a powerful question emerges. What now? Some parents choose to withdraw completely, swallowing their hurt and building walls. Others lash out of pain, not anger, and end up pushing their children further away. But there's another way, a quieter, stronger way. And it begins with redefining what respect looks like in this new chapter of life. Respect doesn't always come wrapped in phone calls and thank yous. And sometimes it shows up only after you stop chasing it. You see, when you constantly bend over backwards for your children and always available, always saying yes, always putting yourself last, you don't teach them how much you love them. You teach them that your needs don't matter. Now, and over time, they believe it. This doesn't happen because they're cruel or ungrateful. It happens because you taught them without meaning to that you'll keep giving even when it hurts, that you'll stay silent even when you're disrespected, that your love comes without limits and your presence without conditions. But here's the powerful truth. You can change that story. You can begin again, not by shutting your children out, but by stepping into your own strength, by remembering that you are still a person with value, with a voice, with a life that matters outside of your role as mom or dad. If the first step, stop trying to prove your worth. You don't need to. You already gave your children the best years of your life. You helped shape them into who they are. That's something no one can take away. Now it's time to reclaim your seat at the table, not through guilt, but through grace, not by demanding their respect, but by showing them how deeply you respect yourself. Because the most powerful thing a parent can do is to stop waiting to be seen and start living like they already are. The trap of pleasing while saying yes. Too often silently teaches others to say no to you. There's a moment many parents don't even notice when the desire to be helpful slowly turns into a habit of self-erasure. You say yes, even when you're tired. You show up, even when you're hurting. You agree to help, rearrange your day, cancel your plans just to keep the peace or to feel needed. But here's the hard truth. The more you chase their approval, the less they respect you. Not because they don't love you, but because over time, people begin to value what stands strong, not what always yields. Let's talk about Margaret. Margaret was 68 when she realized that every decision in her life was being made around her children's needs. She would drop everything if her daughter needed help with the grandkids. She loaned money without hesitation, even when it strained her own finances. She let her adult son speak to her in a tone that would make any stranger pause just to avoid conflict, to keep the family together. "I just want to be a good mom," she said. But what her children saw wasn't a strong, loving mother. They saw someone who didn't set limits, who would bend and bend until she disappeared completely. And the more she gave, the less they listened. It wasn't malice. It was conditioning. You see, when we say yes to everything, we accidentally teach people that our time, our energy, and our needs are negotiable, that they come second. And over time, our kindness becomes background noise, expected, assumed, no longer acknowledged. That's why learning to say no is one of the most loving things you can do, not just for yourself, but for your family. It's not about becoming cold or distant. It's about becoming whole again. Imagine this. Your adult child calls and asks for help. Now, watching the grandkids on a day you've already made plans for yourself. Instead of canceling your day without a second thought, you respond, "I'd love to help, but I already have something on the calendar. Maybe another time." That one sentence, spoken kindly but firmly, can shift everything. It shows that your time matters, that you have a life outside of service, that you're not just waiting around to be useful, you're living. And yes, it might ruffle feathers at first. They may seem disappointed, they might even get frustrated, but what you're doing is planting a seed. You're resetting the dynamic. You're reminding them gently, but clearly, that your boundaries deserve respect. And over time, that respect grows. You stop being the parent who's always there and become the parent whose presence is appreciated because it's no longer guaranteed. And when they do call, when they do ask, you'll know it's not just out of habit. It's because they truly value your time and your help. Here's what no one tells you. Saying no doesn't make you less loving. It makes your love more meaningful, because love without limits often turns into quiet resentment, and that's not good for anyone. So if you found yourself constantly giving, constantly saying yes, constantly erasing your own needs for the sake of your kids, it's time to pause, to reflect, to ask yourself, what am I teaching them by always being available? And what would happen if I valued my time just a little more? You might be surprised at the answer. Respect starts with how you treat yourself. And when you begin honoring your own needs, your own time, your own peace, others start to follow. It's not about pushing people away. It's about pulling yourself back into the center of your own life. The power of boundaries. Teaching others how to treat you. Most people misunderstand boundaries. They think of them as walls, cold, rigid, shutting people out. But in truth, real boundaries are the opposite. They're bridges. They're the quiet instructions that teach the people in your life, especially your adult children, how to treat you with care, kindness, and respect. Boundaries say, "I love you, and I love me too." Just think about this. If someone kept walking through your front door without knocking, eventually you'd start to feel uncomfortable, maybe even disrespected. Not because they're trying to hurt you, but because they're not acknowledging that this is your space. The same is true with emotional boundaries. When your children interrupt you mid-sentence, make choices that affect you without consulting you, or speak in tones that leave you feeling small, it might not be because they're cruel. It might simply be that they were never taught where the line is. And here's something most parents never say out loud. We often taught them that without even realizing it. Maybe we stayed quiet to keep the peace. Maybe we let little things slide. Maybe we were too afraid of being seen as difficult or too eager to stay close. But silence, over time, becomes permission. Let me introduce you to Robert. Robert was a proud father in his 70s, a retired business owner, respected in every room except his own home. His children constantly interrupted him, spoke over him, and ignored his input. At family dinners, he'd often sit in silence, not because he had nothing to say, but because no one made space for him to speak. One evening, after being sharply corrected by his son during a conversation, Robert did something different. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't storm out. He simply waited until everyone was calm and said, with steady confidence, "You don't have to agree with me. But if I'm going to be part of this conversation, I expect to be treated with respect. Otherwise, I'll step away." No threats, no guilt, just a clear line in the sand. It was quiet after that. Uncomfortable, yes, but necessary, and slowly things began to change. Because here's the secret. You don't earn respect by demanding it. You earn it by embodying it, by showing, not telling, others how to engage with you. When Robert began carrying himself with quiet strength, when he spoke clearly and calmly about what he would and wouldn't accept, his children listened. Maybe not immediately, but eventually they began to adjust. They stopped rolling their eyes. They started asking for his opinion again. They remembered who he was, not just as their dad, but as a man with wisdom, worth, and boundaries. So if you've been tolerating disrespect, brushing it off, laughing it away, or swallowing it to avoid conflict, it might be time to pause and ask, what am I allowing that no longer feels right? And even more importantly, what would change if I spoke up, not with anger, but with clarity? Boundaries don't have to be loud. In fact, the strongest ones are often soft and steady. I'm not comfortable with that. That doesn't work for me. Let's take a break and come back to this later. I deserve to be spoken to kindly. Simple words, powerful shifts. Because the truth is, you teach others how to treat you. And when you begin honoring yourself, others begin to follow your lead. You're not being mean, you're being clear. And clarity, especially in families, is a gift. So remember this. Setting boundaries doesn't push people away. It teaches them how to come closer with respect. Stop chasing. Start living how to attract respect without asking for it. There's something that happens deep inside when the people we love start pulling away. We don't always talk about it, but we feel it. It's the quiet ache when they don't call, the heavy silence after they cancel a visit, the sting when your love feels one-sided. And so, like many parents, you might start chasing their presence, reaching out more, offering more, giving more. But the harder you try to feel needed, the more invisible you begin to feel. It's a heartbreaking pattern, and one that doesn't often lead to closeness. In fact, it usually leads to exhaustion and resentment. Not just for you, but for them too. So here's the radical idea. Stop chasing, start living, not to punish them, not to make a point, but to reclaim something that's quietly slipped away, your sense of self. And let me tell you about Helen. Helen was 74 when she realized that most of her day being revolved around waiting for her kids to call, waiting to be invited to dinner, waiting to feel important again. She meant well. She checked in often, left voicemails, sent texts, reminded them she missed them, but something unexpected happened. The more she reached out, the more they withdrew. And she couldn't understand why. After all, wasn't she just showing love? But here's what she came to learn and what changed everything. People, even our children, are more drawn to those who are emotionally grounded, not emotionally dependent. So Helen made a quiet decision. She wasn't going to beg for attention anymore. She was going to fill her own cup. She joined a painting class, something she hadn't done in decades. She met friends for lunch, started reading again, even tried ballroom dancing just for the fun of it. She didn't stop loving her kids. She just stopped centering her entire life around them. And do you know what happened? Her phone started ringing more. Her children started asking about her life. They missed her, not her reminders, but her presence. The way she lit up when she talked about her new hobbies, the joy in her voice, the independence in her spirit. Because, here's the truth. When you live a life that brings you joy, you become magnetic. Or not through guilt, not through effort, but through energy. People respect those who respect themselves. People are drawn to those who shine from within. When your happiness no longer depends on how often they call, they'll start calling more because now they're reaching out to someone who feels alive. You don't need to be the center of their world, but you should be the center of your own. That means waking up and asking, what do I want to do today? What would bring me joy? What have I been putting off that I'm finally ready to start? Maybe it's writing that book you've been thinking about, planting a garden, traveling somewhere new, reconnecting with an old friend, or simply sitting outside with a cup of coffee and the morning sun on your face without waiting for a text to feel seen. You don't need permission to start living again. You just need to say yes to yourself. So if your heart has been heavy with the feeling of being left behind, here's the most loving thing you can do. Don't chase. Don't plead. Live. Because the most beautiful part, when you stop chasing their time, they'll start valuing yours. Giving without being noticed, why it's time to pull back with love. There's a kind of giving that feels good, joyful, natural, generous. And then there's the kind that slowly empties you. It's the kind where you're always the first to offer help, always the one rearranging your day to make things easier for others. Always the one giving time, energy, advice, money without a second thought. And at first it feels like love, but over time, when the thank yous fade, when the favors go unnoticed, when no one even pauses to ask how you're doing, something starts to crack inside, you begin to wonder, do they even see me anymore? Let me tell you about George. George is a father of 3. He's the kind of man everyone could count on. Need a ride? Call George. Need a loan? George will help. Moving? He's got the truck and the strong back even at 72. He was the helper, the fixer, the one who never said no. But when George had a minor surgery, something shifted. He didn't need much, just someone to stay the night, maybe help with meals for a day or two. Or he mentioned it to his kids, expecting at least one of them to offer. None of them did. They were busy. They had meetings, weekend trips, responsibilities. Let us know if it gets bad, one of them said. That night, George sat alone in his recliner, a bandage on his side and a deeper wound in his heart. That moment didn't turn him bitter, but it did wake him up. He realized that he'd taught his kids something over the years, not by his words, but by his actions. Dad will always say yes. Dad doesn't need help. Dad's fine. And because he never asked for anything, that they believed it. That's when George made a quiet shift. He didn't cut anyone off. He didn't lecture or guilt trip. He simply started saying no, softly, kindly, and with clarity. I'd love to help, but I've got other plans. Sure, I can help, but only if we split the responsibilities. I'm not available that day, but I hope it goes smoothly. At first, his kids were confused. One even got irritated. But over time, something incredible happened. They started saying thank you again. They started checking in before asking for favors. They started seeing him again, not just as a provider, but as a person. Because here's what many loving parents don't realize. When you give endlessly without limits, your generosity stops being special. It starts being expected. And expected generosity rarely gets acknowledged. But when you pull back just a little, something powerful happens. Your presence is no longer assumed. Your help becomes valuable again. And your children begin to recognize your time and effort not as something owed, but as something offered. So if you're in a season where you're giving more than you're receiving, if you feel drained, overlooked, or quietly taken for granted, it might be time to reset. Not with anger, not with distance, but with intention. Start asking, is this something I want to do? Is this appreciated or just expected? Am I saying yes because it brings me joy or because I'm afraid of disappointing someone? Give from a full heart, not from a need to feel needed, because love that's given freely is beautiful, but love that's demanded drains the soul. You're not here to prove your love. You already have, over decades. Now, it's time to receive love back, not just in words, but in action. And sometimes, the best way to be appreciated again is to lovingly step back and let others feel the space you once filled so freely. You are not just a parent rediscovering yourself beyond the role for decades. Your identity may have been wrapped tightly in one word, parent, and rightly so. You built a life around nurturing, guiding, sacrificing. You were the one they turned to, the one who made sure the lights stayed on, meals were on the table, and hearts were mended after breakups, failures, and hard lessons. You were there always. But now, with the kids grown and living their own lives, something strange starts to happen. You look around and ask, who am I now? If I'm no longer needed every day, it's a question few talk about, yet millions feel in their bones. Here's the truth. You are still someone. You are still whole. You are still becoming. Let me introduce you to Eleanor. Eleanor is 76, a retired librarian, mother of 4, widow of 12 years. Her days used to be full raising kids, volunteering at school, baking birthday cakes, showing up for every piano recital and basketball game. But when the house grew quiet, so did her sense of purpose. She found herself waiting for a call, waiting for an invite, waiting to feel important again. Until one day, while flipping through an old photo album, she saw a picture of herself in her 20s, laughing, holding a paintbrush, surrounded by half-finished canvases. And in that moment, she remembered something. She used to be an artist. She hadn't picked up a brush in over 40 years, so Eleanor made a quiet choice. She bought a new set of paints, signed up for a local art class, and started painting again, not for praise, not for anyone else, but for her. And in rediscovering that long-lost part of herself, something else returned. Joy. Not the kind that depends on how often her kids called or how many visits she got. A joy rooted in creation and identity in herself. That's the shift so many parents never make, but desperately need to, because you are not just someone's mother or father or grandparent. You are a person with dreams, hobbies, desires, and stories that matter, even now, especially now. And when your children see that you're living, not just waiting, they start to see you differently, not as a background character in their busy lives, but as someone they admire. When you pursue the things that light you up, gardening, writing, dance, singing, traveling, volunteering, Joe send a powerful message. I am not done growing. And that's inspiring. It also shifts the energy in your relationship. Instead of feeling like an obligation, you become a source of light, not because you've demanded attention, but because you've reclaimed your own. You become someone with something to talk about. A new class, a new recipe, a story from the book club, a funny moment from lunch with friends. Conversations become richer, connections become stronger, and most importantly, you begin to feel like you again. So if you've been waiting for someone else to give you permission to live, here it is. Live boldly, live fully, live for you. You have earned more than just quiet afternoons and being on call for favors. You've earned joy, freedom, creativity, laughter, and peace. You've earned the right to choose yourself again. In doing so doesn't mean you love your children any less. It simply means you love yourself enough to stop shrinking and start expanding, because your story isn't over. In many ways, it's just beginning. Calm is power. While you don't need to argue to be heard, there comes a point in life when you realize that raising your voice doesn't raise your value. You've probably been there. Sitting at the dinner table, biting your tongue while one of your adult children speaks to you with impatience, or worse, with disrespect. Maybe they dismiss your ideas, roll their eyes, speak over you, and deep down, a fire rises. You want to shout, "After everything I've done for you, how dare you speak to me that way?" And let's be honest, who could blame you? You've earned your voice. You've earned the right to be heard. But here's what might surprise you. Arguing doesn't make them listen. Calm does. Let me tell you about Frank. Frank spent 35 years as a high school teacher. In his classroom, his voice carried weight. His students respected him. They listened. But at home, it was a different story. His grown kids barely let him finish a sentence. They interrupted, mocked his advice, acted like he didn't understand how the world works anymore. At first, Frank fought back. He argued. He listed his accomplishments. He reminded them of all the sacrifices he'd made. But every conversation became a battleground. And still, nothing changed. So Frank did something unexpected. He stopped fighting. That doesn't mean he stayed silent. He still spoke, but he stopped trying to win. He stopped trying to prove. He spoke with calm, measured clarity, not to convince, but to express. And slowly, his tone began to carry more weight than his words ever had before. When he didn't raise his voice, his children noticed. When he paused before responding, they leaned in. Because here's the truth. People listen differently when they feel the presence of quiet strength. Frank embodied respect, even when it wasn't offered in return, and over time, something changed. His kids began to mirror his energy. They softened. They slowed down. They began to see the wisdom behind his calm. Because calm is power. It's not weakness. It's not passivity. It's not giving in. It's control. It's dignity. It's knowing that you don't have to prove your worth. You just have to own it. So if you're facing disrespect and your instinct is to push back harder, pause. Take a breath, and then speak not from frustration, but from truth. You can say, I hear you, but I don't accept that tone. I'm happy to have this conversation when we can both speak respectfully. I know what I'm saying may not be what you want to hear, but I deserve to say it. You don't need to argue to be heard. You just need to stop lowering your standards to keep the peace. And yes, at first, people might be surprised. They're used to the version of you who keeps the water smooth. But when you show up grounded, steady, and self-assured, they start to meet you there. It may not happen overnight, but it will happen. Because you're no longer playing the old game of back and forth. You're showing them a new way to engage with mutual respect at the center. And that shift, that's what rebuilds connection. Not louder words, but stronger presence. So let this be your reminder. Your calm is not a lack of fire. It's the evidence that you've learned to burn with purpose. As we grow older, one of the hardest truths to accept is that love doesn't always look the way it used to. Our children may grow distant, respect may waver, but that doesn't mean our worth has faded. The lesson here is simple, yet powerful. Respect begins within. When you stop overextending, when you set healthy boundaries, and when you start living for you, not out of guilt or fear of being forgotten, you shift the way others see you. You don't need to argue to be heard. You don't need to please to be loved. You simply need to stand in quiet strength and live with dignity. And when you do, something amazing happens. You begin attracting respect, not demanding it. You rediscover joy, not as someone's parent, but as your full, vibrant self. So if this message speaks to you, if you've ever felt invisible or unappreciated, know this. You are not alone, and your story matters. Subscribe to the channel and join a growing community of wise, courageous souls, learning to reclaim their voice, their peace, and their purpose. Because it's never too late to be seen again, not just by others, but by yourself.